from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, today the majority has brought forward a cruel, extreme, and unworkable piece of legislation which would wreck our economy, destroy the asylum system, criminalize visa overstays, send unaccompanied children back to dangerous situations, and jail children indefinitely. Once again, my Republican colleagues show us that they are not interested in finding real solutions to tough issues. This bill attempts to combine a variety of different bills, each one more cruel and heartless than the last, into one contradictory and overlapping mess. This bill has no chance of being enacted into law, and it is nothing more than pure political theater. My Republican colleagues are trying to take us back to the failed, illegal, and immoral policies of the Trump administration. Former President Trump's radical, inhumane, and racist immigration actions weakened the U.S. economy, undermined our moral standing in the world, and did not make us any safer. While trampling on some of our most deeply held American values, his erratic approach also failed to stem the flow of migrants across our border. Let's be very clear about what this legislation would do. When taken together, this bill serves as a wholesale ban on asylum. No one would be able to seek asylum in the United States if they crossed between ports of entry or if they had or could have had even temporary status in a third country. Let me give you an example of what this means. If the Russian dissident Alexei Navalny, whom Putin attempted to poison twice, was somehow released from his prison in Siberia and took a plane flight to seek political asylum in the United States, but the plane touched down for refueling in Bulgaria, he would have to stay in Bulgaria. He couldn't come to the United States. During the Judiciary Committee's markup, Democrats offered a variety of amendments to exempt the most vulnerable from some of these draconian requirements. This included those fleeing communist and totalitarian regimes and unaccompanied children. But the majority was not even willing to exempt children under a year old. The one place where we were able to make some bipartisan headway was on the issue of E-Verify. E-Verify is an electronic employment eligibility verification system that began as a voluntary pilot program and is currently used by a small percentage of the nation's employers. This bill would make that system mandatory for all employers in the United States. Without providing other reforms, however, including any meaningful opportunity for undocumented workers to regularize their status, this title would damage the U.S. economy, harm American workers, and result in billions of dollars in lost government revenue. In particular, mandatory E-Verify would decimate the agriculture industry, putting U.S. farms out of business, shipping millions of American jobs overseas, and increasing U.S. reliance on imported food. Mandatory E-Verify would result in hundreds of thousands of unfilled farm jobs and would leave unpicked crops rotting in the fields, as we saw in Georgia in 2011, when a mandatory E-Verify law in the state resulted in over 11,000 farm jobs going unfilled during the peak harvest season. Unfortunately, it appears that some of my Republican colleagues with significant agriculture interests in their districts are now willing to support this draconian legislation. Despite sincere concerns about how this provision would affect their constituents, they have caved to Republican leadership with the mere addition of a sense of Congress. That is pathetic. I have only scratched the surface of the many problems contained in this legislation. I have not even mentioned how this bill strips all protections from unaccompanied children and requires all families who come to our border seeking protection to be detained indefinitely, or the extreme lengths to which it goes to narrow the eligibility grounds for asylum, or how this bill would severely restrict this and any future administration's ability to parole individuals into the United States, even going so far as to end the current parole initiatives for Ukrainians fleeing Russia and for certain military families. That means that no Ukrainians fleeing the war in Russia would be allowed into this country. It also means that all Ukrainians here, after a time, would have to return to Ukraine, even if the war is still going on. Mr. Speaker, Immigration reform is a complicated problem that requires complicated solutions, and an enforcement-only strategy simply doesn't work. Democrats have put forward real proposals, and we stand ready to work with serious Republicans to pass meaningful solutions. Democrats take this humanitarian crisis seriously. Our proposals address the root causes of migration, improve border security, and create additional legal pathways for people to enter the United States lawfully. But Republicans have chosen a narrow path that imposes extreme pain and hardship on the most vulnerable people while doing nothing to actually solve the problem. I encourage my colleagues to oppose this wrong-headed bill, and I ask the majority to go back to the drawing board. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.